everybody. Happy Friday. I always get the Friday slot. I feel quite honored. Really hope that there's a few of you here. Please swipe in and say hi. Love to see who's here and who's listening. As usual, I want to keep this session quite sort of practical. So please put through all your questions, anything that you've been wondering about at all. We're going to talk a bit about soya, the pros, the cons, some of the rumors, some of the anecdotal evidence versus research, and I really hope that you'll have a few questions, and then we can get going from there. But let's start off, maybe kick off. Hello, Auntie Pat, lovely to see you. We'll kick off with the presentation, and then I'll have a look and we can answer some questions. All right, so moving across to the presentation now. So the question that a lot of people are asking is, am I eating too much soy? I think there's a concern, and especially sort of with respect to different types of cancer. There's been a lot of publicity and media talking around this point, more so probably a few years ago. I think things have settled down more recently, but it's still a topical question, and I often hear people sort of saying, well, isn't that too much soy? Won't that have a potential negative effect? And I'm hoping by the end of this session, we can answer some of those questions, and you can feel more comfortable with soya if you are including it in your diet. Hi there, Roz. Lovely that you're joining us. Okay, so first of all, just to give you a bit of an overview of what soy foods are, what commonly known foods contain soy. And I think that the first place to start is just to sort of give a brief overview. And you possibly all know this already, but soy is a really good protein and a plant-based protein. So a good alternative to your normal sort of animal-based proteins, like sort of your dairy, your regular cow's milk dairy, your meats, your chicken, your fish. It's also very rich in fiber. So unlike other more animal-based forms of protein, you'll find that plant-based forms of protein have the added bonus in that they come full of fiber. And we probably all know the benefits of fiber by now, the different types of fiber, and really important for healthy digestive system, but also for controlling your sugar levels and for controlling your cholesterol levels, really important there as well. Another fantastic feature of soya is the B vitamins, a nice array of different B vitamins, important for energy levels, important for functioning or effective functioning of the mind as well, thinking, cognition, all of that, very much dependent on your B vitamins, as well as a strong immune system, really important for that. Magnesium and also healthy fats, so nice monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, some omega-3s in soy foods as well. Now, this is where the next point we're going to chat about is, I think, where all the controversy sort of stemmed from, and that is that soy foods are rich in isoflavones. Now, that's another word for isoflavones are phytoestrogens. And immediately everyone picks up their ear or their ears, and they think estrogens, okay, so you'll be adding estrogens to our body, and could there not be implications? Especially when it comes to cancer, we know that sort of breast cancer, there's the estrogen receptor form of cancer, where there's a concern, where too much estrogen, high levels of estrogen can sort of increase your risk, or can cause a cancer in susceptible people. I must word that correctly, but I think you got the message there. So what's actually being shown now is that a lot of research is actually showing that these phytoestrogens have anti-cancer properties, also antioxidant properties, and anti-inflammatory properties. And I'm sure a lot of you know that a lot of our diseases, heart disease, rheumatoid arthritis, all stem, a lot of inflammatory bowel disease, all stem or sort of result because of a state of inflammation in the body, sort of systemic inflammation. So anything that's going to be sort of anti-inflammatory in nature, it would be positive, very positive. The downside of too much anti-inflammatory features in a food or in any form would be that it can also blunt the immune system, which we don't want. So there's always a fine balance between too much and too little of something. And then always, I thought we'd just add it here as well, I'll mention this a bit later, is that when we're talking about soy, there's so many different types. There's a highly processed soya, genetically modified, all of that, versus the minimally processed soya. And when we speak about minimally processed soya, I'm referring to the likes of the soybeans, edamame, tempeh, tofu, miso, soy milk, all of those minimally processed forms of soy. All right, so let's delve a little bit deeper and look more at sort of the soy estrogen connection. So the misconceptions stem from the fact that it contains estrogen, but it's a very similar chemical structure to the estrogen that we have in our human bodies, but it is not exactly the same. So it cannot be classified. It does not have the same function as the estrogen we have circulating, that our body creates and circulates around our body. There is no proven link to cancer at all. And that's important to note as well, is that the link there is really, there isn't a link. In fact, more and more research is now showing that, in fact, if you look at the overall picture, and if you look at people who are taking tamoxifen, which is a treatment for cancer, there's actually a reduced recurrence of the cancer with people including sort of those isoflavonoids, the phytoestrogens. So there's a lot of positivity there and a lot of research pointing in that direction rather than negative potential increased risk of developing cancer, which is quite interesting because a few years ago that wasn't the case. That said, I'm definitely not advocating that you should run out quickly and go and stock up on some supplements containing isoflavones. That's definitely not what I'm saying. I think we need more research around that. And what I would suggest is that you look at some foods that do contain soy and you eat them in the form of whole foods. Definitely, and we always advocate this, whole foods is better than any kind of refined, processed, or supplement packaged form of that food. And just to give you an idea as well, that other foods that are rich in isoflavones, or these phytoestrogens, include linseeds, flax seeds, sesame seeds, berries. I mean, I'm sure we all eat berries on a regular basis, oats, barley, lentils, rice. So it's not just the soy foods where you'll find these phytoestrogens or these isoflavones. It's widespread. All right, so then moving on to the next slide, soy and the thyroid. Now, thyroid, there's also, and some of you might not be as aware of the connection here, but there's no link in terms of soya foods causing thyroid disease, nothing at all, and the research shows that. However, what one does see is that some of the thyroid meds that you take could actually be affected if you are having a lot of soy. And so the recommendation, the sort of mechanism behind it is not really well known, but the recommendation there is that you shouldn't eat soy foods at least 4 hours after taking your thyroid meds, just to err on the side of caution and safety. Okay, so then let's move on to allergies. Now, I don't know if you're aware of it, but soy actually forms part of the legume family of foods. So other legumes there would be all your dried beans, chickpeas, lentils, all of those form part of the same family. And I mean, those foods are fantastic, just in terms of managing those cholesterol levels, managing your sugar levels. It's got high levels of that nice soluble fiber, which is so important for all those functions. So really, soy is part of a very important family, and a family of foods that we try and include and incorporate as far as possible. It's not always the most popular tasting foods. I know for me, sort of, the beans, like kidney beans and butter beans, all of that, it really does nothing for my taste buds, but that's why we always try and disguise it a little bit. And there's quite a few nice recipes on the Jeff Web app. Some of you would have tried maybe the bean, banana, and bran muffin recipe. But sometimes you just need to get a bit clever, and like chickpeas, you roast the chickpeas and suddenly they taste incredible. So I just thought I'd getting a little bit off the topic there, but I think it's important to mention that even though it's not necessarily the best tasting food for you, it really is a part of an important group of foods that we do try and incorporate into our daily diet. Okay, so back to allergens. So it is actually, soy is classified up there with the top few allergens, together with your milk or your dairy foods, fish, shellfish, tree nuts, wheat, gluten in wheat, eggs, and peanuts. However, it is not the highest. So if you had to put all of those in order, you'd find that soy sits at the bottom. But it's still one of the highest foods. So compared to something else containing protein, it's actually potentially has a relatively high risk, or not risk, prevalence of allergy, but not hugely significant in terms of actual numbers. So in children, and I think that's where we often see most of the soy allergies, it usually begins before the age of 3 and resolves itself by the age of 10. So that is significant. A lot of the time, your allergy to soy is not going to continue into adulthood, which is very positive. So that's something to be aware of as well. And sometimes it's a case of sort of the soy milk, breast milk substitutes that cause a problem. And you've got to get quite creative, and it's actually quite tricky as a dietitian as well, helping kids who are allergic to soy, because soy, and you'll see in the next slide, soy can appear in all sorts of foods, and you've really got to have your wits about you if you're trying to avoid it. And some of the symptoms that you could get from an allergy to soy would be tingling in your mouth, hives, abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting. Those are the digestive systems. Skin redness, and then of course the more sort of severe and serious symptoms would be swelling of lips, tongue, and throat. So it depends on the degree of allergy. There's always that risk of anaphylactic shock, and if you have any of those sort of swelling lips, tongue, and throat, you need to obviously get medical attention ASAP. Okay, so then moving on to those surprising places where you might find soy, where you might have never thought you would. Now, I've listed a few things here. It's not to say by any means that these foods all contain soy, and you'll find that some of our local products, you actually struggle to find soy as an ingredient in these products. But it's something to be aware of, and especially sort of quite a few overseas products as well, would sometimes you would see that soy word or a version of the soy word appear in the ingredient list, and it's just worth being aware of, especially if there is an allergy or potential intolerance to soy. So it's Worcestershire sauce, mayonnaise, some mayonnaise, natural and artificial flavorings. That's a biggie, and you'll often find it there. Even in sort of fillers in processed meats like chicken nuggets, you often find that the soy appearing there. Peanut butter, some of them, some cereals. And then on the right here, I've just put a list of some of the words and the things you need to look out for and get suspicious. If you see these words in the ingredient list, you might be you can be quite confident that there's going to be a bit of soy in the ingredients there. And why do people use soy? In the food industry, it's used as an emulsifier, also a texture enhancer, as an antioxidant to help foods last for longer as well. So it serves a good purpose. These forms of soy are not necessarily going to give you all the benefits that we chatted about earlier. It's very processed forms of soy. You want to have those whole foods to get the benefits that we spoke about in terms of fiber, in terms of good protein, all those vitamins. So just bear that in mind, that it's always going to be the whole foods that you want to focus your attention on. So then, in a nutshell, should we or should we not include it in your diet? And I'm hoping, or in your own diet, I'm hoping by now that you're going to agree that yes, it would actually be a good idea. But the reason I'm saying that is, yes, it's giving you all the benefits, but it's similar to a lot of other legumes in terms of what you're getting from it and the benefits you get from it. So I think what's important to establish and to determine here is that if you like the taste of some of those soy foods, like your tempeh, like the miso, like your edamame, if those tastes appeal to you, then absolutely include those foods. If you're vegan or vegetarian and you naturally need to eat more plant-based forms of protein, then yes, absolutely include those foods as well. But if you're somebody who just actually cannot stand the taste of any soy products, I'm not saying you need to now include those foods in your diet. If you can tolerate chickpeas, or you can disguise some beans in another format, that's absolutely fine as well. And you're still going to get a lot of the benefits that you would get from soya, from those other forms of plant protein. So also the fermented forms, so the tempeh, the miso, those would be a lot better. And again, it's linking to sort of the more unprocessed forms, but those would be so much better for your gut microbiota, just because of the natures to how they've come about, fermented with bacteria. So yes, if you enjoy those foods, fantastic, big thumbs up, continue to have them. Excellent source of plant-based protein and calcium, which is also really, really important. And often if we're not eating sort of cow's milk and classic dairy products, we miss out quite a bit of calcium. And it's important for strong bones, important for so many other functions, sort of heart function, all of that, muscle function, really, really important role that calcium has. And we need to ensure that we are getting enough. And yes, soya is an excellent source of calcium too. Now, as I said before as well, always try and eat the minimally processed forms of anything, to be honest. But now, because we're speaking about soya. So have the soy beans, edamame, tempeh, tofu, miso, soy milk, all of those sort of least refined forms of soya would be ideal. I wouldn't recommend you run out at all and get some supplements or concentrated forms of soy or isoflavonoids. I think you can easily get it from your food, and there's so many other benefits from getting it from your food as opposed to supplement form. As I say, you get all the fiber, all those vitamins and minerals thrown into the mix as well when it's from food. So in terms of guidelines as to how much you can have, how much you should have, typically sort of the research and the consensus is if you're vegetarian or vegan, you can have 2 to 5 servings a day. And to give you a rough idea of what that means, one serving would be roughly half a cup of soy-containing foods, preferably the unprocessed form. Or maybe just to sort of enhance your health and to get some benefits from the isoflavonoids that you find in soy products, maybe try and include twice per week. Sort of as a way of getting more plant protein in. So if you eat more sort of in the way of the meat, the fish and chicken, then maybe this is a good way to slowly introduce some other sort of plant-based forms of protein that's going to give you benefits, wide range of benefits from vitamins, minerals, fiber, and just reducing your overall saturated fat intake, which is sort of the type of fat that you typically find in all your animal forms of protein. Okay, so I hope that all made sense. I'm really hoping if we go back now, we can see some nice questions. Okay, so Nancy, yes, I see sort of a thyroid issue. So it's not very sort of commonly known knowledge that you should sort of watch your soy intake when taking your medication, but it's practical enough. If you take your medication in the morning, by lunchtime you can include some soy. So it's just a rough guideline, 4 hours grace period. All right, so let's have a look here. Hello everybody, so lovely to see you all. Some nice familiar names here. I'm not seeing too much in the way of questions coming through here. Maybe share some of your experiences if you have any. If you are somebody who eats soy regularly, what form you prefer, recommendations in terms of how to prepare soy foods. I mean, I know personally I'm not a big soy fan, and I don't eat a lot of soy foods. It sort of goes out of my comfort zone if I do, and a lot of the times because I don't actually know how to prepare it to make it taste nice. And with my girls, if I prepared them some tofu, it would be the end of life as we know it. So I think with my husband as well, actually. So I'd love to hear some of your ideas and creative ideas. I know quite a few of my clients who are on the one-on-one program. They prepare delicious dishes, and I get inspired actually. I just wish I could prepare them the same way, but they look seriously divine, and they get so much benefit from that. And it really, really, really looks delicious. But I think I don't think there's any sort of major science behind preparing it. But I think you just need to experiment, and if it's something that you just really don't enjoy the taste of, it's okay. Include other forms of legumes. But if it is something that you do enjoy, then really I would recommend that you try and include more of it in your diet. Okay, I see here. Also not a fan, Nancy. I wasn't going to pretend, but it has to be seriously well disguised for me to have it. Okay, question here. My 19-year-old daughter has been recently diagnosed with soy allergy and even chocolate. Yes. So that's hectic. And as you can see, soya appears everywhere. I mean, that list that I showed you earlier with the different places, people and food manufacturers use soya a lot. It's a great emulsifier, and also with, it really is useful in terms of texture as well. So she's got to be especially careful, especially when eating out as well. That normally is actually the most risky time, because you're not getting an ingredient list. I think it's a lot easier if you've got sort of a gluten allergy, because it's more well known, and it's easier to identify. But soya is a tricky one. Okay, have you read an article that says that soy can affect a man's fertility? Not sure if that applies only to processed soy foods. What's your feedback? So my feedback on that is, yes, you're going to get some articles that will sort of allude to that, but the research is not indicating that at all. And the thinking behind that I would imagine in that article would have been because of its estrogenic effects and the estrogenic structure, but it is not the same as human estrogen. So and I know there's a whole lot of sort of there's anecdotal evidence, there's research to show that it can dampen some of the menopausal symptoms experienced as well. So it can have sort of vague estrogenic effects, but nothing that's going to be majorly significant from the current research that's out there. So I think there it could literally just be a case of, phytoestrogen equals, oh dear, I'm going to have too much estrogen, that's going to affect my balance of testosterone, estrogen, and my fertility. So that would be my take on that. I'd love to read the article, but yeah, I think a lot of people sort of jump to conclusions quite quickly because of the connection there with phytoestrogen, estrogen. So that would be my take on that. All right, but it's very interesting. And I know from own experience with my mom as well, so when she was going through menopause many years ago, there was a big concern around that as well. And that, no, I can't eat soy foods, that could be potentially problematic. And yet you had sort of all those phytoestrogen creams as well, which were thinking to sort of help. And a lot of people find they do. So I'm definitely not saying, if you find that phytoestrogen creams, things are relieving some of your symptoms, then that's fantastic. But there's not a huge amount of evidence to support that, and maybe it's because of the anti-inflammatory effects as well. It's not necessarily because of the sort of phytoestrogen component of that cream. And as I mentioned in the earlier slides, there's a massive connection with anti-inflammatory properties when it comes to all those sort of flavonoids and specifically isoflavonoids as well. That's a whole talk all on its own. I think we could spend a lot of time there. Those flavonoids and plant compounds are incredible with all their antioxidant features, and that's all proven. There's a lot of research to support that, antioxidant levels and anti-inflammatory. So in terms of soya, you could just see that as a general healthy food to reduce overall inflammation, and there that would apply to anybody. In terms of heart disease, one of the big risks there is inflammation. And we know that's also sort of inflammatory conditions and syndromes, inflammatory bowel disease, all of that. There's a major inflammation component, and anything that can sort of reduce that would be a good idea. But again, you've got to take into consideration quantities, what other foods you're having, if there's any potential intolerances or allergies to the soya. And always focus on having sort of the whole food where possible, and that applies to absolutely everything. As soon as it's processed, a lot of the goodness has been removed, and it could potentially be that goodness that's actually been giving you the benefits in the first place. Okay, any other questions whilst we're here, or any stories that you'd like to share, your own experiences? My job here is to sort of to relay some of the research, my own personal experiences, but it's not to say, and this is the whole field of nutrition as well, is that there's a lot of stuff that hasn't been researched and a lot of different angles that haven't been looked at. So if you've got input, if you've got feedback, I'd absolutely love to hear it. I'm very open mind and very happy to discuss it. And I think that's what we always have to do, is we've got to consider all sides, and we've got to consider the fact that maybe the study design wasn't correct, maybe it needs to be looked at a slightly different approach. And so it's important that everybody share their stories, that you look at the full picture. But that said as well, is that so often people who want to sell products potentially, or sell a concept or an idea, will grasp on sort of one study, and they'll say, well, this study said this and this and this, and maybe it's poor study design, maybe it's only one study and there's 99 other studies looking at the same thing that didn't show it. And obviously there, sort of, if you look at the stats, it's the 99 other studies you need to be looking at the results of. So you must just really bear in mind, and that brings us back to sort of the article that was mentioned there, is that you've got to go in with a very open mind, but also a critical mind. And you must think sort of where's the author coming from? Did they look at the study design? Did they look at other studies that potentially contradicted what that study found? Because that happens all the time. And that's why when we're looking at research, it's a case of sort of doing a meta-analysis, looking at all the research, looking at all the studies and looking at the study designs. And if one study design, it doesn't fit the criteria, you take that out of the review. And you look at all the studies that are sort of high quality, and then you'll find some of them support your hypothesis or what you're trying to prove, others don't. And it's kind of like majority rules. So, and that's where then you would say, okay, well, the research is showing that it typically doesn't or does increase risk of whatever it might be. So it's important that you're aware of that when looking and looking at articles, reading articles, doing your own research. Okay, there's never a silly question. Soy is a protein source. So is soy milk a better option, nutrient-wise, than nut milks, or they're very similar? Very good question. Love that question. Thank you for bringing it up. So yes, soy milk is an excellent source of protein and calcium. So if you're looking for a substitute for regular cow's milk, I would always say soy milk first. Definitely. Your nut milks, almond milks, I mean, almond milk is sort of like flavored water. You're not getting protein there, nothing significant at all. So that is literally, I say if you want to use something like almond milk, it's purely to add the flavor because you love the flavor of almond milk. But from a protein calcium point of view, unless it's been fortified with calcium, and most of them aren't, you're not really getting the benefit of having a milk at all. You're getting fluid and a taste. So yes, soy milk, definitely a better option in terms of getting your protein and getting your calcium in. Okay, so soy is a protein supplement because allergic to anything with beef. So there, perfect as well. And thank goodness we've got all these alternatives. And that's a good alternative. So you're getting a lot of benefit there in terms of your soy protein supplement. That's absolutely fine. There's often also there's a nice one, I think it's Health Connection, where there's a plant protein mix as well. So you're getting a whole sort of different protein profile of different plants. And there, again, great to include that if you are wanting to add more plant protein. And my advice is that everybody should be trying to sort of reduce the animal protein, not exclude it by any means, but basically reduce it so that you can add a little bit of the plant protein. So if you're typically like me, where sort of chicken, fish, and red meat forms the basis of your protein intake, then maybe experiment a little bit, whether it's in the form of your protein supplement, but a plant protein supplement, if you really can't handle the taste of the legumes and the plant proteins. But first prize would be to include some of those nice sort of whole forms of soya, or even chickpeas, beans, lentils, and if you're not quite ready for soya. You can see that I struggle with soya a little bit, it's probably shown. But yeah, if you like soya and if you tolerate and enjoy it, please include it. And if you've never tried it, please try it first. Yeah, there's lots of ways you can disguise plant proteins as well. So I've become very clever, very subtle with that when it comes to sort of other forms of legumes, because there really are so many benefits, and rather you include than don't include at all. And disguising works beautifully well. I mean, my kids still, well, now they do, the older one does, but for a long time they didn't know that I was adding kidney beans to their favorite banana muffins, and like the one time they saw me adding it and was like, what is that? So I said it was chocolate beans, as a good mother would do, but that didn't last long either. So yeah, my message there is, if the taste doesn't appeal, I know it doesn't appeal to a lot of people, just get creative as to how you can incorporate it. You can still incorporate it, it can still appeal to family members, you just maybe need to get a little bit more creative. All right, it's been fantastic chatting. If there's any more questions, please let me know, and if I've missed them, then maybe post them again. But I think I've gone through everything. I will pop on this group as well if you've got any other questions, or if you want to chat to me privately, you're welcome to DM me as well. I'll be very happy to chat to you. But thank you to everybody who's been here. I hope you've managed to get something from the talk. And if you're not somebody who eats soy regularly, I urge you to try it and try and get creative in the ways that you include it in your eating plan. All right, but have a super weekend and hopefully chat soon. Cheers for now.